Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Again, I'm Katrina Indaway, Director of Marketing and Communications with the Oakville Soccer Club, and thank you for joining us for another one of our live interview series that we've been conducting throughout this crazy time away from the field. Thanks to everybody who's been following along with our live sessions and joining in each week for activities as well as watching interviews. We're very excited, very lucky tonight. We have Dan Moor joining us. Dan is a professional rugby player at Team Canada as well as Toronto Arrows and has all sorts of experience and a really wide background in professional sports and as an athlete. So we're very excited to welcome you tonight. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Katrina, thanks so much for having me, and to the hello to the Oakville Soccer Club and to everybody's watching tonight. Thanks for joining us and looking forward to having a good conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And we put up some promo for this, and we said we're talking to Dan Moor, and he's a rugby player. And some people said, well, why are you talking to a rugby player? You guys play soccer. But I think that when it comes down to the experience as an athlete, obviously you're playing different sports in some ways, but you have a lot of similar experiences. A lot of the requirements and things that are asked of you are the same across sports. I'm sure you have different experiences with sports growing up. So we think that there's a lot of value in talking to sort of anybody who's had this kind of exciting journey and has been had the world of sports take them all over the place like you have. So why don't you start off telling us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? And did you play any other sports growing up and that kind of stuff?
Well, actually, Katrina, and originally when I was growing up, I was actually first and foremost a soccer player. So I played for Leaside in Toronto, which might not win me any favors with this crowd tonight, being from Oakville. But
we're gonna let it go. We're gonna.
Yeah, no, I was a soccer player growing up. I mean, growing up, I actually played all sorts of sports. I've spent about 10 years growing up in Calgary, so I was lucky enough to be close to the Rockies and ski. Played hockey like I think every sort of young Canadian kid growing up. Basketball, soccer, really tried my hand at everything. But when I went to university at Queen's, I was lucky enough to start playing rugby there, which has a really great rugby program, and really sort of fell in love with that sport. And sort of the better part of 10 years, I've sort of been dedicating as much time as possible to that endeavor. And been lucky enough to sort of travel the world. I think that's one thing that's great about soccer, rugby, some of these more sort of European-based games, is that they are played globally around the world, and there's fantastic travel opportunities. And I really encourage any young player that when those opportunities present themselves to take advantage, because I think you learn so much from seeing different parts of the world, interacting with different cultures, learning how different people even think and play the game as well. I think is huge for your own development. But after university, I was lucky enough to play for the Ontario provincial team. From there, made my way up the ranks to the Canadian national team, which has been a great honor for me. From there, I went to the UK. I played for the University of Oxford, which has a really strong rugby program, and was lucky enough to play professionally in England for 2 seasons after that, before coming home and playing for the Toronto Arrows, which, if you haven't heard of us, we're the first professional rugby union team in Canada, and been lucky enough to captain the squad for the last 2 years. Similar to a lot of people on the call tonight, unfortunately, our seasons have all been collectively cut short, but I think there's still opportunity to train, to maybe be a bit more of a student of the game, and learn something, or an opportunity to work on skills and get better as an athlete.
Which is a really great point. And that's awesome that you say that, because we've talked to, everybody's itching to get back on the field, and we're working on return to play, and we want to get back out as fast as we can. And, as government restrictions change, and we all get really excited, but the opportunity that we've really tried to emphasize to players, and that we've been really proud to see a lot of our players take advantage of, is working on that skill set and taking that time to sort of view the game from a different perspective when you have time away from the field and you're not necessarily in a game ready state all the time. I think that's been a great opportunity. So it's really neat to hear that that's happening at all levels of the game. And it's not just something that, young athletes and up and coming athletes are doing, but professional athletes like yourself are. So that's a really cool point. Tell us a little bit about how you got, so you started playing rugby and you fell in love with that game, and you had the opportunity to play here as well as across the pond. And what were the differences sort of between when you started playing here and then you went over there? What did you notice that stood out, that felt a little bit different to you?
Well, England, I mean, first and foremost, it's really a country of soccer, but its second biggest game is rugby. To sort of be able to play in a country where you're completely immersed in it, people really care about those pro clubs. You're really sort of woven into the community. Was an incredible experience. I spent a couple months on trial for one of the big clubs in the Premiership called Wasps, And at WAS, I was able to rub shoulders with really some of the best players in the world. So at the time there was a fullback that played for WAS called Willie LaRue. He was the fullback for South Africa when they won the World Cup this past fall. So just being able to have that exposure to that talent of players, it's amazing. In Canada, and this is probably similar to soccer, we generally take the game a little bit later. So being able to be beside those players who have been playing since they're 3, 4, had a ball in their hands since such a young age, they've seen so many different pictures, and as a result, I think that helps them with those decision making. If you think about Canada versus like South Africa, let's say, on the world stage, is really the number of repetitions that they've seen visually. And so I think that was really cool to be able to actually, from a first-hand perspective, when a player made an amazing play in training, actually say, like, what was the picture that you saw there? Why did you make that decision? And then learn from those pictures, I think is really key and was massive to my development.
Very cool. And to see the perspective between the two, and like you said, in Canada, hockey's a big sport and everybody wants to play it, but there are these other, like soccer from a young age, and then people evolve into other sports. Rugby's really like gained traction and visibility, especially since Toronto Arrows showed up, and as people learn more about it. So, but it's not rugby, I don't think tends to be a sport that you play super young necessarily around here. So what made you, like, you played soccer and then you saw rugby, and it's a much more aggressive game than many. So what about when you were introduced to rugby, sort of what about the sport appealed to you and you're like, that one's the sport for me?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always did play hockey and other, full contact sports growing up. So I would be lying if I said I wasn't drawn to the sort of physical nature of rugby, for sure. I'm not exactly sure what it was. Like, sometimes it's hard to sort of describe, but I really liked the camaraderie and sort of the team culture in rugby. There's definitely elements that are similar to soccer and some sort of distinct elements as well. And I sort of appreciated some of those distinct elements for what they were. But yeah, no, it's kind of hard to, if I was able to put my finger on it, then it'd be an easier question as to why I've sort of just chased an oval ball around for the last 10 years, going around to different parts of the world, but I've just been really drawn to it. It's both that physical side of the game, that sort of very visceral, sort of instinctive physicality and competitiveness, but also it's actually a very cerebral game. And like soccer, very strategic in terms of, in soccer you have 11, in rugby you have 15 players sort of strategically together trying to achieve a goal. But, in the heat of the moment, it's so hard to communicate, sort of at a high level what you're trying to do. But it's really cool to see how teams evolve throughout a season, and almost, towards the end of a season, no words, or you don't even have to look at each other, where guys are, like, you're all just on the same page. I think when you get a team that's really firing on all cylinders and performing at its true potential, it's such a special feeling. It's such a rewarding experience, both as an individual to be a part of it, but also the team more broadly.
Makes sense. I guess when you fall, in love with those sorts of sports too, like, it's just something speaks to you, and you're out there, and it's adrenaline, and it's something that you keep experiencing over and over again. So I guess that love just grows, and the opportunities that it's afforded you to be traveling, all over the world and get to experience the game in different ways, then how could you not love it more and more every time, right? Tell us a little bit about the difference. So you you played here, went to England, so a much more rugby established, country, and then you came back to a brand new team, like a brand new experience in a country where, like, they're sort of learning more about it and now have this opportunity to watch it in their backyard that they didn't have before. So what was it like, sort of being a part of this, like, startup, bit of a movement in the Toronto area, and this team that's had the opportunity to start engaging, people and young kids on a different level to learn about the sport? Yeah,
for sure. I think firstly, there is actually a really strong grassroots network of rugby in Toronto, in the GTA and in Ontario. Very passionate, sort of strong but mighty. So there was a lot of people that were really excited for us to come home and this team, or for me to come home and be part of something in my hometown. All our players are pretty much through the I think 85 or 90% of our players are through the grassroots network in Toronto and in the GTA. So, I think that's really exciting for our fan base, because a lot of those guys we either, played with that are showing up to our games, or, they previously played at the club, or there's some sort of connection. So we're really sort of embedded into the Toronto rugby community, and then the sort of broader challenges to how do we grow our game, how do we get the average Toronto sports fan, I think is a challenge that I think our players probably take on a bit more than in a normal pro sports context. Like I don't think too many of the Leafs players are running around sort of pounding the pavement saying come out to our games, but I think our players, we sort of know the startup and the scale sort of nature of our franchise at this point. We're incredibly appreciative of the opportunity because you haven't been able to play pro rugby in Canada before this opportunity. And so as a result, the guys are incredibly passionate to try and make sure that this makes sense from a business sustainability standpoint. So trying to convince people to come out, whether it's friends, buddies. I think once we actually do get people out to our games, I think they see the entertainment value. It's a fast flowing game. That physical aspect to it, the skill level, just sort of the size of the players and like sort of the range of players. Like you can have some of the biggest guys I've ever seen, sort of 6'4" fridges that can actually shift and run around the field, and tiny little sort of more skilled guys. So I think to see that sort of diversity, that variety of body types, positions, players, and sort of assets they bring to the field, whether it's strength or speed, it's an exciting mix that I think over time Toronto sports fans and hopefully more broadly Canadian sports fans will really get behind us. I think one thing that's an advantage for us is if you look at like the Raptors or the Blue Jays, they're really the baseball team of Canada or the basketball team of Canada. We'd love to be the rugby team of Canada. We have to work for it. It's nothing taken for granted, but hopefully we can play some exciting rugby. And we had some exciting opportunities this year. We had relationships with TSN that will obviously help us sort of grow our exposure and our footprint in Canada. And I think, there's some really strong tailwinds behind the sport in this country.
Definitely. Well, it's definitely on the rise, that's for sure. And now, you've nowhere to go but up with creating opportunities for people to become more engaged with it. So that's, it's a lot of work in the beginning. You get to sort of pave the way for the people who get to come after you and, enjoy your successes and the success of the team that you had to build. But to be a part of that would be pretty exciting. You're part of like building what, is the rugby legacy in Canada. So really exciting for you guys and happy for you. And we're happy that you're right next door to us, close to Oakville. Where do you guys play out of?
So this year we were going to split our season between York University and games down at Lamport. So easy go train ride in from Oakville to Lamport.
Perfect access from Oakville. And we do have a strong rugby network in Oakville as well. Shout out to Oakville Crusaders and all the other rugby clubs in Oakville. They train some at our facility sometimes. We have a lot of interaction and see them around. So we'll definitely look to share more information when everybody can get back on the field and seasons can resume. We will make that information available. We'll share stuff from Toronto Arrows as well. So everybody can take advantage of helping to support this really fun and exciting sport. And it is a fun sport to watch. It took me like a hot minute to figure out what was going on the first few times I watched it, truthfully. And especially when you come from soccer, you're like, wait a minute, that's not like our instincts are a little different, but definitely a fun game to watch. And once you figure out how it works, you're like, okay, yep, this is really neat. You also played for Team Canada, correct?
Yeah. So I've been lucky enough to represent Canada in what we call like captain internationals 14 times and represent Canada A or Canada in a different sense, probably sort of 20 or 25 times. So incredible experience to be able to pull on a jersey with your country's colors. And one of the sort of great memories for me in my life really is being able to play for Canada the first time in front of a hometown crowd, or in front of a home crowd in terms of in Victoria, BC. But my parents are both immigrants to Canada, and to see them in the stands and be able to go decent personally in that game and sort of celebrate that with them it was a really special experience, because I think behind any athlete is generally some great family support to get there, like the amount of practices. Hopefully this is resonating with some Oakville Soccer Club parents here. Those maybe it might be a little bit thankless potentially when your kids are a little bit younger, but I look at my stage and so incredibly thankful to my parents for the shifts that they did in driving, or my mom letting the dinners run cold so I could train you know, sort of every night of the week or whatever it
Always,
was. So,
yeah, at the expense of.
yeah. If you're not getting the big thanks now, parents, I think at some point your child will come back to you and appreciate it. So that thank you is coming if you haven't heard it already.
Yeah, that's the plan, hopefully. Anyways, we have a comment.
To those young players, make sure to say thanks to your parents.
Yeah, exactly. Any players watching, that goes for every sport, always. And you should definitely probably just thank your parents regardless. They do a lot of great things for you. Julie's one of our coaches. She's watching right now, and she says, I saw Team Canada win bronze at the HSBC Rugby Sevens Championship in Vancouver in March. That's where I fell in love with rugby. It was such an awesome tournament. So Julie was there, and her and I were chatting earlier, and she was so pumped for this interview, and she was excited that, that rugby was getting some exposure too, because it is just a really neat sport that a lot of people, like you said, as the notoriety starts, or as you end up at a game or you have the opportunity to watch, and you kind of get hooked on it because it is really energetic and sort of magnetic that way. So thanks, Julie, for sharing that. Another one of our coaches, Davey's watching, and he asked, would I be right in saying that soccer has more injuries than rugby?
I would have thought rugby has a lot more injuries than soccer, but maybe did I hear the question correctly?
Oh yeah, the question was stated as soccer has more injuries than rugby. The question is, so I guess Davey's thinking, is there more injuries in soccer? I think maybe the injuries are a little different, the contact's a little different.
Yeah, I'll put a disclaimer on this answer that I'm no medical professional, nor have I the data or anything back in, but I guess I won't be scared to comment on it. I mean, I think there's probably different types of injuries, like in soccer. It seems like fairly finely tuned athletes, particularly at the professional level, and a lot of sort of like soft tissue injury. Whereas I think in rugby, there's just the amount of collisions and some of the speed at which they happen. There's probably slightly more catastrophic injuries, I would have.
It's actually a really good way to assess it.
Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, at the professional level, you're really spending so much time working on your body and making sure that you're strengthening, all those sort of stabilizing muscles and working on your mobility. We have an incredible strength and conditioning setup at the Toronto Arrows. The strength and conditioning coach that we have, Sean Harrison, is the best that I've ever worked with across any team, and the amount of work that goes into making sure that we're really proactive and prevent injuries, I think is a huge reason why in the pro context you don't actually see that many big injuries. Like they do occur, but I think any professional or amateur level sport is going to have some percentage of people that get injured. But where I actually saw the sort of worst injuries, if you will, was when I was coming up through the ranks in amateur rugby, because at the pro level, the people the guys are spending their time, we're on that mobility, on that proactive preventative maintenance work, and then also a massive focus on recovery. I think recovery is huge at the pro level. I mean, if you want your team to get better, you have to be able to push your body to the limits and then work really, really hard to recover so that you can push yourself to the limits the next day again. And honestly, that's like really boring stuff that I think people, don't think about, that comes with the territory. But the biggest one is getting 8 hours sleep. Like going to bed early is the biggest thing. Eating right, making sure that you're hydrating. We train at U of T, so we have this fantastic facilities there in terms of using hot and cold tubs after, like all those little recovery bits to try and find 1 or 2, 5% more recovery so that you can get more out of your body the next day. I really think that's the difference makers between teams doing really well and then potentially not be able to last the season, or having repeated success is building a culture where it's focused on recovery, focused on being able to get the most out of your body day to day.
It makes a lot of sense. And we get a lot of, I know, especially with young athletes and up and coming, especially rep teams and stuff, when they have to do, it's strength and conditioning night, and it's not always the favorite. Some kids love it, some kids don't as much, but all of those facets are so important to, like, physical literacy stuff when they're working on that, and with the strength and conditioning coaches, and saying like, oh, I just want to hammer goals and that's what I want to do. But the fundamentals are as important, of like your body being able to move and able to recover and able to stretch and able to push yourself are so important. So even though it might not be your most favorite part, it's so imperative to being a strong athlete is to have your body strong and your mind strong, and that's allowing to the recovery. And that's the other thing, when everybody if you get injured or you pull something or you tweak something and you push yourself before you should, or you don't take the amount of time, and players are always itching to get back on the field, but you got to remind them too that if you don't heal properly, you're not going to be able to play properly. And that's really, I think, solid for everybody watching to hear that's, coming straight from the mouth of a professional athlete. You have to let it happen. So let yourself heal and go to bed early tonight. Get some rest.
Yeah, seriously, Katrina. I think also it's really key that it's, it's consistent. Like, I think that's the biggest thing, like being good for a month in the like, sort of long scheme of things really makes no difference. It's about being really, like, developing really consistent habits that are driving those good behaviors. And now a lot of athletes are all year round rather than sort of off season, on season that we've seen sort of historically. And then I think the other thing is trying to get those habits as early as you can, but not taking away from the love of it. I think that's, one of the most important things as a young athlete is making sure that you love the game. You don't want to, sort of burn out or feel like you're doing too much too soon.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. What is it? So it's been talking about taking care of yourself and sort of getting in the right headspace. So what does your game prep look like, sort of mentally? Like, do you have like a process you go through? Is there something you like eat before games, or like how do you sort of on game day? What does like pre-game prep look like for you?
Yeah. So one thing, when I was younger, I was really superstitious as an athlete. And, had to put on the, left shoe before the right and stuff. And when I was sort of in my late teens, I would get really stressed out if I didn't do one of those things. And I said, well, that makes no sense because I don't think it actually impacts the outcome of my performance. So I've actually just tried to completely scrap that and have no superstitions. I do definitely have sort of game day preparation. One big thing I like to do in the morning of a game day is goal set. So I actually have a journal and write down sort of 3 or 4 sort of goals that I have based on, what I've been focused on in that week. So whether it was, better tackle height, or a little bit more accuracy in my pass, or, looking for opportunities like by holding width in our play, like, making a mental note of having goals for that game. And then also probably having 2 or 3 sort of words of encouragement or things to keep in my mind and have like a positive mindset going into that game. I find the toughest games to prep for are the night games because you have all day sitting around in the hotel. So I think it's really key. I like to try and get my mind off the game, go out for a walk where I'm not, putting too many meters on my legs, but just, getting out, being social with the guys. I always love a nap. And then, we're lucky to have, meals that are given to us with like the proper nutrition, etc. And then, I like to listen to a little bit of music on the way to the game, but as soon as I get there, unplug and start to try and get into the zone a little bit. But I think the biggest thing on game day is like really being positive to yourself, being confident, and realizing that particularly in my experience in rugby, at least, if you don't have nerves, then I don't think it's a good thing, particularly if you're putting yourself in a little bit of physical harm's way. I think if you're a young athlete and you're finding the nerves a little bit hard to deal with, I think so much in life is how you think about it, and think about it as a positive. Like it shows to you that you're really excited about this opportunity. You're excited to go out there and express yourself, and you're excited, and again, you're excited about it. So take it as something that's sort of like strengthening your instincts, if you will, or sort of sharpening your instincts. And then just sort of trust in your preparation, and hopefully you've done the things that week and looked after your body to go out there and perform. And you don't need to put too much pressure on yourself. Just take a deep breath before you run out there and enjoy it as well.
Yeah, you've got to enjoy it. That's key. And there's got to be some enjoyment as getting to go out there and see, especially when you're representing Canada, or you're representing even Toronto, and you're representing the sport that you love, and you get to go and there's people in the stands, and there must be a lot of like excitement and motivation that comes with that helps sort of launch you into the zone when you're playing as well, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the beauty of the game. I mean, I would even say, like, even at club level, sort of the way that the game makes me feel, like right before kickoff, that sort of mix of nerves and excitement, and maybe a little bit of apprehension about that first contact. Very few things in life mimic that. And I think that's sort of what the draw is to it, the unpredictable nature. I think particularly, with the Arrows as captain, you feel a little bit more responsible in terms of how's the team actually going to perform on the day. And sometimes, most of the time I don't really know. I take a lot of confidence from how we prepared that week. But sometimes you have your day and sometimes you don't. And on those days that you don't, being able to work together with your teammates to kind of troubleshoot and get past challenges or obstacles, whatever's happening in the game, look for opportunities. I think you got to be excited for those challenges. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. How these games and opportunities and sort of the unpredictable nature of sports make you feel is not really replicable in any other form of life. And I think that's the draw to it. And obviously at the amateur level, that's one thing. And I said, I love that as it steps up and being able to perform in great stadiums around the world. I got to play against Italy at BMO Field in my hometown, which was really special. I got to play at Twickenham Stadium in England, which is really the mecca of rugby in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
I'll look back on that in sort of 10, 15, 20 years and be like, those are really special experiences, and remember the feeling that comes along with those, that feeling in the tunnel before a game. That mixture of sort of anxiety and excitement, like I talked about, is something I'll never forget.
Exciting. That would be a great feeling. What about after a game? So you've played the game and all athletes have good games, not so great games. You have a win, you have a loss. Like, how do you decompress after a game?
I try not to think too much about it after a game, to be honest. We do a lot of film review in the professional ranks, so I won't touch the film or really think about it too much until the next morning when your emotions aren't as close to it. But it's like, I think sports is very true to who you are. It's part of your identity. So when it doesn't go well, it's tough to handle. I think making sure that there's some sort of perspective with if it goes negatively, and perspective if it goes positively. To be honest, I've sort of noticed in my life that when I'm just focused on rugby, those ups and downs feel sort of higher and lower, if you will, whereas you have something else outside that's sort of part of your identity and part of what you're focused on. It actually probably gives you a bit more stability and actually enables you to sort of enjoy your rugby or your sport a little bit more and actually perform a little bit better. That was actually also an insight. There's a really famous rugby player from New Zealand called Dan Carter, and in his autobiography, which I think is also a tip for sort of young players, read about some of your soccer and your playing heroes and see how they think about the game, and maybe there's lessons in there that you can apply to your own game. And Dan Carter, said there was one year where he gave up literally everything for the 18 months before the World Cup. And when he went there was just so much pressure on himself because he just thought of himself as a rugby player, and there was nothing else going on in his life. And sometimes, it's great to have a little bit of diversity of things, whether it's just another hobby or whatever it is, to make sure that you have that ability to get away from the game, decompress. And I think those breaks actually help you perform better on game day.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really, really great advice. So thank you for sharing that with our players. You talked a little bit about being the captain. So what advice would you give to sort of young captains in sports who have been sort of tasked with this title and this responsibility? What kind of advice can you give towards being a strong captain and leader on your team?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of being a captain is that you have a diversity of people, backgrounds, particularly as you get older, like different life cycles and what does it mean to them, and for younger, you're sort of the same age and stuff, but trying to like sort of captivate everybody and sort of inspire them towards the same common goal is like sort of the challenge, right? And I think for those young players, making sure that you connect with all your different teammates, you kind of hear their point of view, and understanding that different messages or different motivations are out there for different people. So making sure that you're kind of, for everybody in the team, that you're sort of motivating them the right way to sort of achieve whatever goal everybody's working towards together.
Good sense, and it's definitely not a role to take lightly, but you can learn a lot about leadership through through sports and through not just being a captain, but helping to motivate and positively influence your teammates and fellow players. So that's really cool. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with coaches? What's it like? Do you have advice for players on building relationships with their coaches, or how to maybe work with a tough coach or a coach that they're having a hard time relating to? Have you ever had an experience like that you've had to grow a little bit from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in terms of, building relationships with coaches, I think just sort of as a player, understanding like how to be coachable helps build that relationship, and being really sort of cognizant of how to sort of efficiently use their time. Like they have 30 players that they're helping coach. So if you have a question, interrupting them maybe in the middle of practice is not the best use of that, but save up your questions at the end and get clarity so that at the session you get learnings from it. I'd really encourage all young players, you really have to be proactive with coaches. The coaches have so much on their plate. They have so many different players. And I think a lot of players sort of sit back and say, oh, well, the coach hasn't come up and talked to me. But, you have to also take responsibility for your own development, understanding how your game grows and gets better. And that's really being proactive, going up to coaches, asking them for feedback. If you make a decision or you make a play and you're not sure if it was the right decision, well, go ask your coach. That's the only way that you can learn is, by getting that direction, getting those insights from someone. So I think sort of to sort of sum up that piece of advice, it's about being proactive with those relationships with coaches, going to them with those questions so that there's clarity, and you actually, make sure that what they want you to execute as part of your role in the broader team and strategy.
That's really great advice, and really relevant for players, especially young players, as you sort of come up and coaches change sometimes, and it's learning, like you said, how to be coachable and how to best communicate, and direct and straight communication is always a really strong skill to develop, and a great place to learn to hone that is within your soccer team and with your coach. So very, very good advice. Talking a little bit about relationships with players on the team, do you find it difficult to be in that captain position sometimes? Like when it comes to forming players with relationships, do you feel like there's ever a hierarchy or anything like that? Or do you feel like can still, everybody sees eye to eye and you can still form those super strong relationships with your teammates?
Yeah, I think my relationship style is or my sort of leadership style is more, through action, lead by example. I think it's really key for me to be able to build those relationships with different players, and because then when I do want to say something, when I do want to get a message across, you have the buy-in and sort of the credibility to get those messages across. I've never thought of it as we, at least with the Arrows, like in our culture, we try to flatten any sort of hierarchy. I want to, at the end of the day, be able to hear different opinions on what we're trying to do, the coaching setup, the environment, like particularly our daily training environment. I want ideas coming from all different areas of the team, because we have people who have played at the highest level of rugby in the world, whether it's professionally in Australia, whether it's professionally in Argentina. There's this wealth of knowledge that we need to try and tap into in order to improve our own training environment and get the most out of our team. So I want all those ideas to come in. There's going to be a certain point where, it's either myself or one of the coaches or management needs to make a decision and say, this is the way we're going. But I think as long as you've heard everybody's opinion, you'll have that credibility and that buy-in to, in your decision making, that they'll listen to you at that point. So, I don't find it difficult to build relationships. If anything, I think the friendships and real bonds that you are able to build with people help you, pull them along on that sort of journey where you're trying to get everybody to.
Great, really cool. You said you obviously played a bunch of sports growing up, or were interested in lots of different sports before you sort of fell into rugby. So tell us, who are some of your favorite athletes and role models when you were growing up and as you got into rugby?
Yeah, so in the rugby context, the player I just mentioned, Dan Carter, which might not be a familiar name to too many people on the call tonight, but he really is a legend in rugby. Same with a guy called Richie McCaw, both Kiwis. But I think they really sort of represent that sort of selfless Kiwi attitude, to sports and ready to, or really willing to not cut corners, put in all the hard yards, put in the hard work, and really sacrifice for those teammates. So that's why I looked up to. But in sort of hockey, I think even some of the names, I'm probably dating myself a little bit to the soccer athletes on, but Joe Sakic, Steve Yzerman were the hockey heroes that I had growing up. In basketball, obviously I was sort of born in Toronto, spent most of my life growing up in Toronto. So I had Vince Carter on a pedestal, and
Sure.
Kyle Lowry now is probably my favorite player on the Raps. So I think as I sort of said earlier, I think it's important to sort of learn a bit more about those people that you aspire to be like, and in certain cases, whether it's videos or books or whatever, you could probably learn something from them in terms of how they think about their own game, around mentality, but skill accumulation, all those kind of things.
Well, we've all dated ourselves in these interviews. I've had kids comment and be like, who are you talking about? So don't worry about that. So things are changing, rules are starting to loosen a little bit, restrictions are starting to change, and we can all get out and interact a little bit more. But prior to that, it's been a long couple of months. How have you stayed sort of positive and keeping busy during this last couple of months, this quarantine kind of time?
Yeah, I mean, I really think movement is medicine. So I think getting your workout in and as best as you can. I live with two guys on our team. And at least one of my roommates are pretty good at kicking out of bed in the morning. We work out and sort of hold each other accountable. So in these cases, try and find a family member, brother, sister. Maybe you can get your mom or dad to get up early, or at some point in the day do a little bit of activity. I think it's so important right now to get that movement at some point in the day. I took a little bit of a break from rugby. I think that's actually really healthy, but I've noticed my sort of desire to watch film and think about the game maybe differently, and then also sort of touch a rugby ball in our backyard is coming back. So I think if there's young soccer players that are chomping at the bit right now, COVID's a fantastic opportunity to work on those skills. I really do think my first piece of advice probably for young players is like enjoy it and just have as much fun as possible. The second thing is it's really all about skills. Like skills are really what transition. If you have aspirations to play higher level in your career, which is not for everyone, I'm not sort of advocating for that point of view, but if you do, I think skills are really the difference maker. You might be the most athletic player at 15 or something in your region, but over time people just get more and more athletic as that pool of athletes widens. And so the differentiator really is skill sets, and a lot of skill work you can do, dragging one of your parents or one of your siblings out to the backyard and tossing a ball to you and you volleying it back, or working on your headers or whatever it may be in the soccer context. But there's a lot of great work that you can do from a skill point of view, and honestly, it's not you don't need to go out and do 5 hours of work every day. It's making it back to that whole sort of consistency theme. How can you do 15-20 minutes of really purposeful, focused practice every day over the long term? I think that wins out. And then we're seeing, at least in soccer, I think Bundesliga is coming back. I think the Premier League kicked off last night. Watch higher level soccer and enjoy that as well. I think that's another way to keep learning and being a student of the game.
That's great advice. And you actually stole my next question, was what advice would you give to players? So that was answered really well. So we'll wrap it up and I'll ask one last question. What do you love about sports in general? I've asked everybody, what do you love about soccer? And I know you loved soccer and probably still have love for it in your heart, but we can generalize it to like, what do you love about sports in general? What does it do for people that you love about it?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll start smaller soccer. To be honest, those events around like the Euro and the World Cup, those are such amazing events. I mean, the Soccer World Cup I know is the biggest. I think it's the biggest sporting event in the world. Like how countries rally together and how sports and soccer in particular in a lot of Europe and all around the world, how those bring people together, bring communities, bring countries. I was, for the last Soccer World Cup, I was living in England, and that country was just obsessed, and everybody I think was, 20% friendlier, 20% more outgoing over the duration because England was going on a bit of a run. So I think that's, amazing about soccer and sports more broadly, how it brings communities together. But, I think my favorite thing is the relationships of people that you meet in sport. Just incredible people. I mean, you think about how selfless a lot of your teammates are, or coaches are, or the administrators are around it. I think it's hard to find those types of people in other walks of life. And then also just the experiences. I've been very lucky where I've been able to travel through South America. I went and lived in New Zealand and played for 6 months. I played professionally in England. Been lucky to tour through a lot of Europe, and with this league that we play in with Toronto Arrows, across some of the most interesting cities in the US, all with sort of 25 people that are like-minded and like to have a good time and that kind of stuff. So there's no adventure like that. But I mean, even when I think about my sort of grassroots experience, just finding like-minded people, the sort of social element to it, being able to bomb around the GTA and play in different rugby matches, or soccer when I was younger as well. Like, those are just incredible bonds, relationships, but also just experiences.
Awesome. An awesome answer. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight. And I have to agree that soccer, or that sports, connects us with all sorts of people who are good-natured and generous in the time that they give. And you are absolutely no exception to that. We really appreciate you hopping on with us and sharing your experience. It's been super fun to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Katrina, thanks so much for having me on and the opportunity to speak to yourself and the Oakville Soccer Club. Thank you very much, guys. Hopefully got a little bit of value out of that. So thanks for having me.
A lot of value. We really appreciate it a lot. Thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight to check out this awesome interview with Dan Moor. Drop a comment if you watched, and let us know how you felt about the interview. Also, straight after this at 7:30, we'll be right back here. We have a double header tonight. We're going to talk to our coach, director of coach development, Mark Wharton, as well as other university coaches from McMaster University and Waterloo University about playing at the post-secondary level in Ontario. They're going to answer some questions and give some tips and information. So be sure to join in for that. Thank you to everyone who has tuned into our live sessions. I'd love to give a shout out to Greg Sinclair, our marketing and events manager at the club. This week is his last week. He has run behind the scenes on all of these sessions. He's also a huge rugby fan. So Dan, he was excited to go out with a bang with this interview, but Greg's moderated everything and worked really hard throughout this time to ensure that we have a lot of content. So I want to give a shout out and a thanks to Greg Sinclair. Thanks to everybody else for watching tonight. Stay tuned for more live interviews coming at you in the next few weeks, as well as information about Return to Play. Your Oakville soccer staff are working very hard behind the scenes to move towards seeing you all on the field again, and we look forward to doing that very soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night. Take care, everyone.